Hey, it's Chris. You liked it last time, so let's do it again. Let's talk to you about my failures on Kickstarter and crowdfunding. 10 games that I said, hey, that looks good. Hey, I'm really going to like that. Hey, I think that would be... And turned out, no. Let's talk about my failures, and let's hope that you can learn something, because I'm clearly not learning. The best part of this video is that as we go through this, it really just makes me more humble and humble and humble, realizing how much money I have truly wasted with some of these in a both good and bad sense. No, not good and bad, mostly bad. Let's do this. Now, a couple of these I still actually have in my collection, either because I've been too lazy to sell them, no one's wanted them, or I just haven't gone the extra mile to try and get rid of them yet. It's a little bit of a combination of all of those. And a couple of these, I'll be frank with you, I want to give another chance to. And so we're going to start off at the very top of this, and you may have known them previously bought or known by Mythic. We have Enchanters. Enchanters is this very nice, delightful game where you're forging unique magical items to defeat rampaging monsters that you're coming across. And it's got this little iconography system where you basically just layer the cards over each other and they build up attacks, they build up strengths. You only get to use the power of the one that's showing on the top. You get items to defend, you get items to attack. And it just seems like a really cool concept because you've got all these little decks that you can mix and match, a la Smash Up, and that sort of thing, where you've got monsters coming out and you're having to defeat them, and who gets what here and there and back and forth. And I don't know. I just, ever since I started playing it, it's always left a bad taste in my mouth. It's always just sort of been way too random. The first couple times we played it, we chose like the perfectly wrong decks to combine. And that just left my wife and I with a sour taste. And I actually went in for 2 different crowdfundings. Maybe, no, you know what? I think I did one crowdfunding that was like the second or third one that I ended up getting more than just one thing with. And I'll be frank with you, I've been very tempted to get more of it, but I just also can't get it to the table. I just don't want to do it. I just have this fear of a sour taste left in my mouth like the morning after, right? That's what this has given me. And the idea of it is absolutely tremendous. A little bit slightly splashier, a little bit more nuanced smash up with a little bit more appeal with the theme. And it just has fallen completely flat. Like that. And so that is why it's on the list. Now, the second one on this list I've already sold, and that one is Arcadia Quest. Again, as a big CMON junkie, buying way too many of them, way too early in my board gaming hobby, interest, career, if you will, from that aspect, I looked at this and I said, wow, more Arcadia Quest? I can't have enough Arcadia Quest. I'm now trying to get rid of most of my Arcadia Quest. I actually sold this one because, from comparison's sake, it made it a little bit more streamlined, a little bit better at lower player counts, but it just didn't hit thematically. And there's so much teardown setup in this style of game as the PvP and PvE that I just find myself not being able to find the right group for this as well. Say what you will, I don't mind the miniatures, I don't mind those elements of things, and I think it's relatively well thought of. But it also has not done anywhere near the acclaim of the original Arcadia Quest. I'm not sure if it's product availability, retail wise, there weren't as many exclusives, but there were more stuff than, say, the original. I mean, the original was the exception rather than the rule. Inferno was more of the rather what we've seen lately, and, you know, Johnny-go-lucky for CMON in that sense. But both of those have had a much wider presence. Both of those have, well, 2,200 reviews on Inferno and over 10,000 reviews for the base game of Arcadia Quest. Starcadia, you know, is ranked in the 2400s on Board Game Geek. Not that that's to say anything, but it just makes you go, why didn't this work? And it's just one of those things that I just can't give you a good answer for, but I can tell you that my own personal feelings kind of reflect what's out there in terms of the scene, and that it just didn't seem to click. The Star Wars parody, Star Trek parody just did not go home. And I wonder if that's also why we haven't seen any more in the line of Arcadia Quest since then, even though we've seen them go back to several IPs, including the more recent Cthulhu Death May Die and Zombicides, 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 and Zombicides. So that's number 2. Number 3, again, is going to be one that the idea of it, Black Rose Wars from Ludus Magnus, the idea of it is absolutely salivatingly delicious, right? This place still smells like ketchup, by the way. Anyway, if you know, you know. But that's something that I just can't get rid of in both cases, right? The idea versus the actual tasting of it. And Black Rose Wars is supposed to be the end-all be-all of the mage asymmetric factions skirmish style. Now, don't get knocked out, come back and fight back and forth, right? Only it plays in about 2 or 3 times what you would think ideally for a game like that, what it should do. The weight is a little bit heavier. Now, the Board Game Geek playtime says 90 minutes. No. And so that's the other issue. The whole shipping fiasco with the Sartor box of the stretch goals with this, where it was one of the first companies, even before the big pandemic crash, of jacking up shipping costs happened because they just threw in a bunch of stuff that they weren't planning for and that they didn't tell anyone about until they went to go ahead and try and get shipped and realized that it was a lot more, so they had everyone pay extra. That left a bad taste in people's mouth too. I think the idea of it is tremendous. It's something that if someone brought it to a game night nowadays, I would be totally up for playing it. But between the cost that I was able to sell it for and recoup more than what I paid and the actual get it to the table side of things, I could not justify keeping it in my collection. And so I just sold it. I did really find myself more attracted to it as opposed to some of these others we'll talk about in a minute. But ultimately, those 2 factors really weighed out. So that's why it's number 3 on this list. Number 4 on this list, we're going to go slightly different here, and it's going to be a little bit of an interesting one. This one's going to be probably the most controversial, and this is Dice Throne Season 2 with the Battle Chest. That's right, I backed this on crowdfunding, got the Battle Chest, the big Battle Chest, and I played it about 3 times, and I hated it. It fell completely flat. Probably the flattest of any of these games on this video, period. And that's saying something. That's saying something that now I actually own a copy of Marvel Dice Throne. Again, not sent to me. I bought this at retail. And right now, my almost 9-year-old is in love with this game. What's the difference? I don't mind it. Is it because I've matured as a gamer? Is it because there are that drastic of a difference between Season 2 and what they've put out in terms of the complexity and the tokens and the interactions and the abilities with this? Probably a little bit. But also that my kid wants to play it as well? Am I looking at getting Season 2? Absolutely not. Is my kid already legitimately, before we finish the first game of this, asked to pick up Doctor Strange, Captain Marvel, Black Widow, and Black Panther. There we go. I almost forgot it there. And so, yeah, he wants to. And so, am I going to end up with those? Probably. Will he get one of them for his birthday in February? Quite possibly. And so we'll see, though. Is it going to hold up? That's the question. Now, we played with the 7-year-old, too, with a little bit of help with the reading, and the 7-year-old actually won. We handicapped a little bit, but that's the sort of thing that I could see myself doing, and this being nice, because even though we say compared it to Marvel United, which we just played as well today, there's a lot more setup and teardown for Marvel United, and Roxley, say what you will, now OP Games, I think, is putting this out, but absolutely tremendous storage teardown setup, and that can't be underestimated, especially with kids. And that's why Dice Throne, again, you know, dichotomy, I know it's there, take it for what you will. Now, next up, we're going to be talking about a different one, Museum here. Holy Grail Games put this one out. They went to crowdfunding, and they had like 6 expansions to go along with it as sort of this open drafting set collection based art game, where you're going through trying to get relics that are going to allow you to set explorers around different places to collect different things back to your own museum to sort of build your own collection up, right? And it was sort of doing too much and not enough all at once. It was sort of convoluted in terms of the mechanisms and just the different things that all of these little expansions were adding. It's a very large exercise in set collection, card management. The expansions spice it up, but they've already put out a second edition in terms of Museum Pictura, which is a standalone, which is already rated higher, despite being rated, 3 years later or 2 years later. It's already thought of as a better product. And that always sort of irks me in that sense. Now, would I pick it up again? Again, this is probably one that I'd say if you brought me a copy of Pictura, I'd play it. I don't think I'd try and play the original again in terms of what I thought it was going to be and what it expected. And you need some of those expansions to actually have some of the spice of the gameplay in terms of the twisting of the different types of set collection card management that it offers. So it was an easy, I think I ended up trading it away, but it's not in my collection either at this standpoint. Next up, number 6 here. This is one you've probably never heard of. This is probably the biggest oddball on this list that you've never heard of. It was a Japanese Kickstarter. It was a combination of games, and both of them I have mixed feelings on, but this one more so than the other one. IZAYOI, I'm probably mispronouncing it. It's a set collection game of Japanese accessories where it's a really weird concept. You have this bidding line, and you're going to be moving across this bidding line, and if you get it, you get like a certain number of points. But the weird thing is, you have to have more points than everyone else in the game, but you also have to have less points than your master, because you're going to start off being dealt a secret card, but you are going to be an apprentice of one thing and a master of another skill. You have to have more than your apprentice, but less than your master, if that makes sense. And so the mechanics just kind of fell flat with us, especially as a hand management voting style of game where you're going to be moving along the track depending on how well you vote. Probably a game I'm never going to get rid of because I don't know anybody that's going to want this. Maybe I'll give it away to the Patreon folks. Or throw it in with another giveaway contest. I mean, I think it's solid for somebody that's going to like it. But for me, I was just like, man, crud. And you know me, because I really like talking about the foreign Japanese games, especially. And I like seeing oddballs and sort of things that aren't done elsewhere done. But this one, for me, it just was a complete pass. And so for that, it's on my trade pile that won't probably go anywhere unless I just give it away. Which, again, whatever. We have misses. That's number 6. Number 7 is going to be one that you're recognizing as well. This was Awkward Guests. It was originally like a 2016 release, and then it went through crowdfunding and came out sort of formally. And as a social deduction-esque hand management game, where you have quote-unquote infinite replayabilities. It's like a Clue version of social deduction as you're going through the rooms trying to figure out who killed Mr. Walton. You're going to be going back and forth, asking questions, and trying to figure out from your opponents based on the cards that they have and the information that they have and the questions that they answer for you in order to figure out who done it. Cluedo on steroids, right? And it's not that that's a bad thing, but I was just looking for something completely different from a social deduction game. I don't know what I was expecting. 100 cases, you're only using about a third of the cards in each game. I don't know. Again, it goes back to the beginning where there was just something missing mechanically, just some sort of letdown, just a little bit too dry in terms of the card interactions and how you can manipulate that or give people the same cards to kind of frustrate them at the same time. So for me, it was a pass. The group, it just kind of fell flat with as well. So it was one of the probably more of a group dynamic necessarily rather than just a personal preference. So that's why it's on the list. So then we have another game that I look at and I go, this should be a winner. Mutants. Mutants from Lucky Duck Games, one of their previous forays prior to the launch into their app-based systems, if you will. And this was a deck builder. 1 to 4 players, you're creating these mixing and matching of genetic component cards with variable player powers. And so you have sort of this placing your card, and then you have one in your active slot, and you move it this way, or you move it this way, and you trigger the ability that it's like its leave ability. And then you have them on the side, and then after they go to the side, then you can either do other actions that are going to be available to you. The idea of it was really intriguing. The execution of it just left a lot to be lacking. There's something good in there, I'm sure, but the sum of the parts did not equal or was significantly less than the individual parts, which is the opposite way of a game like this that I should be feeling. The combos that you could create just left you feeling like it was lackluster, and it was decent, apparently, per a lot of the discussion from a solo aspect, utilizing some of the mechanisms. But for a deck construction building system with asymmetric powers, it just never got its full potential utilized. And so I was able to, I think I sold it on the cheap. I lost money. What did we learn? Gameplay, gameplay, gameplay. Always watch the gameplay. 2 more here. Number 9, we're going to go back to the Japanese games. And this one is one that is familiar if you watch the previous of these 2 videos that I did earlier in 2022, where I got a Japanime game called Tokyo Sidekick. Now this one is Testament. Testament is another Japanese release with being brought over by Japanime to the English-speaking crowd. Cooperative, monster fighting, RPG-esque, upgradable characters with dice rolling. That sounds like it should be a Liege smash hit out of the park, right? Instead, it was a foul ball to left field. Stage by stage, specific rules, play times, difficulties. The rulebook is bad. It's just bad, especially for a game that was previously out prior to a crowdfunding import, essentially. It's an optimization puzzle a little bit as well with the characters, and optimization puzzles really bother me. Not in the sense that it's an actual optimization puzzle, right? But that it's, you know, you really have to do it this way. And it does not flow as smoothly or as quickly, especially at the higher player counts. And you know what? I forgot. I even have it sitting right here, right next to me, right? Like, this art is classic. And the progression is nice, but you can make any character into anything, right? So it's not like they each have necessarily this super unique character tree that you're running through, and this is going to be that much unique or more different than, say, the other person's next to you. It's very difficult. And again, like I said, the biggest barrier is the rules are kind of bleh. And when I have so many other things that I'm looking at, reading, learning on a routine basis, it really drives me crazy when you've got a product that has gone through multiple lines of people testing whatever, and it comes out like this. There is nothing that leaves me wanting more than a horrible rule book and going, there might be a good game in there, but I can't tell, because of how incomplete some of those things are. Have I said, goodbye to this one? Obviously not. Am I willing to give it another chance? Yeah. But at the same time, with the competition nowadays, like I've said previously elsewhere, I'm looking for excellent, not, yeah, I can get through this. Yeah, I can get through this. No. Time is limited. Money is less limited. Time is more limited. So, yeah, I can get rid of it now. Speaking of things that, have just fallen flat to me, last but not least, Is A Narking. Again, from Flanix Games. This is a Martin Wallace game. This is the remake of the Discworld game, Ankh Morpork, I think it is, that was out of print. And then they Sherlock Holmesians it, if that's how you would say that. They made basically a thematic incorporation of Sherlock Holmes, if you will. Bribing, murdering, buying territories, having territories burned down in old London, as you're going through it, trying to navigate it with asymmetric famous characters that you're going to know from said Victorian era. Each of those players has a unique win condition that you're going to be going for. It's an area control game with chaos and hidden roles. And this was about the time when I figured out that area control games are not my forte. They're not my strength. They're not even really an option of what I prefer given a choice. This is an interesting point here at the end. This actually ended up being one of the best trades that I have ever made while being in the middle of this hobby, right? I traded a deluxe Kickstarter version for this game for a copy of the big box of El Grande. And El Grande is a game that's never going to leave my collection, which is, practically speaking, almost the best thing you can ever have happen in these situations, especially when you have a game that, again, just does not work with your play style or the people that you play with. And so, as disappointed as I was to pay that much money and to get a game that I ended up getting rid of, the fact that it got me a forever game, is by far and away the silver lining. So just because it's a bad game for you doesn't mean it's a bad game or a bad game for someone else. So take it for what you will. But those are 10. Again, I have another set of 10 easily to do if I wanted to do a third in this video series. So tell me, what recently have you been disappointed by? What recently have you gotten rid of? Where have your highs and lows been? Because This is very easy for me to look back and just go, holy balls, Batman. You know, I really wasted a lot of money. This is humbling, if nothing else. So take that for what you will. There you go. Stay classy. And humble. See you around.